today to help, Baker Allen, and they're going to be talking about judicial reform, which we need, we need in South Carolina. It's way past time. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome.
Age before beauty, so I'm going to go before Kevin. Good evening, everybody. I'm David Pascoe. Pamela asked me not to try to convert you to Democrats.
Not a Democrat.
I won't do that tonight. You're welcome. I will spare you that. But I did bring Republican backup, as I said. I brought 16th Solicitor Kevin Brackett with me. I brought your Solicitor, our good friend Rick Hubbard, with me. Democrats for Hubbard. But I want to tell you, the fact that I have a bring back up. When I spoke in Greenville, Jeff, 2 years ago, you're the chairman.
I still got the whelps on my back.
But I didn't have the bring back up back then. But man, this crowd is always in the news. So I thought I better bring some Republicans with me. I heard one of y'all's presidential candidates, before I get rolling, she said that chaos always follows one of the other presidential candidates. So y'all see that. And I laughed. I was with my wife Christy, and I laughed. I said, I'm the opposite. I don't bring chaos, but I follow it. I'll run to it every chance I get, because that's when you can get things done.
Vote for it.
That's right, go for it. And that's where you're going to see people, when there's a little bit of chaos, that are going to want to get things done and do it for the right reasons.
Right.
So that's why we're here tonight. And again, I want to thank you. I'm really excited about being here. And one of the things that I'm sick and tired of in South Carolina is corruption and people that go in government for self over the public service, over the public good. And that's what I'm sick and tired of. And so the one thing that's bipartisan is corruption and inefficient government. Corruption and inefficient government are bipartisan problems, and the only way that we're going to solve that problem is with a bipartisan effort. Republicans and Democrats coming together for something like judicial reform. For this reason, I decided a couple of years ago to speak out about our state's problems and corruption. Speak out not just with the Democratic Party, but speak to the grand old party, because I find that I share the same values as you do when it comes to service above self and fighting corruption. I believe that the biggest problem we have right now revolves around the way we pick our judges. We need immediate judicial reform in South Carolina. And I agree wholeheartedly with the governor at the State of the State last year when he said that the public confidence is waning in the way we pick our judges. As most all of you know, we're one of only 2 states. One of only 2 states where the legislature elects our judges. But in our case, in South Carolina, the legislature doesn't vote on the judges. They don't even vote on it until an opaque, secret process with the Judicial Merit Selection Commission, which I'm going to call JMSC for the rest of the night. They don't even get to vote on it until after the JMSC has screened the candidates and decided who the candidates are going to be. And again, I'm going to go into more detail about the JMSC and how we select our judges in a little bit. My insistence on the need for reform is not ideological. In fact, I don't understand how the Democratic Party can support the way we select our judges when we have no women on the Supreme Court in South Carolina. We are the only state, the Democratic Party, the party that's supposed to be the party for diversity. I mean, even y'all all hear that, right? How can the Democratic Party support a process which has no women? We are the only state in the union with no women on the Supreme Court. And come this summer, my friends in the Democratic Party, looking at the cameras, we will have no person of color on the Supreme Court. It is time we change the way we pick our judges in South Carolina. In short, the JMSC process we have right now allows a select few lawyer legislators to exercise tremendous power in the selection of our judges. The same judges that those same lawyer legislators that hire and fire the judges, those lawyer legislators practice law in front of those judges. Think about that. How fair is that? How fair is that? And a simple piece of legislation will eradicate this problem. But my friends, it is being fought tooth and nail by certain legislators that I'm going to talk about tonight. Some of those legislators are right here in your backyard, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them tonight. And why are they fighting this reform so hard? In my opinion, it's because a handful of loyal legislators enjoy being treated as a privileged class in the justice system. And I've said this many times, and have been quoted with this many times, that I believe that when politically connected individuals are treated as a privileged class by members of our judiciary, it erodes public trust in government and the fair administration of the law. And unfortunately, that's what we have in South Carolina right now. And if anyone needs any proof that public confidence is waning and that we need legislation to change the way we pick our judges, when did you ever think you'd see David Pascoe standing next to Alan Wilson agreeing on anything in the state of South Carolina? Republicans, Democrats, over 40 sheriffs came together, and most of the solicitors, Kevin Brackett, Rick Hubbard, calling for judicial reform. I mean, me and Alan Wilson, that's your Christmas miracle. All we're asking for, this is all we're asking for, is to take lawyer legislators off of the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. That's it. A very simple ask. Nothing major at all. It's merely asking that they put the interest of the state above their self-interest. It's not a novel concept. But unfortunately, I'm reminded by what the Gipper once said, that in politics is the second oldest profession, but it bears a very close resemblance to the first, prostitution. Where's my friend that was in Washington, D.C. for so many years? That's true though, isn't it? Very true. But what we need next is leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice. Not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity. And now what I'm going to give you, before I get rolling on judicial reform, is I'm going to give you a bipartisan mindset of the type of legislators we're electing up at the State House. I played this video for Greenville, at least we tried to play it for Greenville, and Baker screwed up the IT. But this took place several years ago. We talk about 3 legislators. 2 are still in the legislature, very powerful, and one of them is a former legislator. The first legislator we're going to talk about is the Speaker of the House, Merle Smith. Merle Smith is by far the most powerful member of the General Assembly. If he wants judicial reform to come out of the House, it'll come out, period. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath unless y'all force your representatives to support judicial reform. A little bit about, keep it there, a little bit about Merle Speaker Smith. He's a lawyer. He also owns reliable medical equipment. He was chairman, before becoming Speaker, of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. He was chairman of the Judicial Merit Selection Committee. The only reason he's not chairman now is because he's Speaker. And guess who appoints 5 to 10 members of the JMSC? So who controls after the Speaker of the House? He is still, to my knowledge, the chairman of the House Ethics Committee, and was of some other subcommittees. Very powerful person. And if you get a chance, and if you're interested, go look at Merle Smith's Statement of Economic Interest online. Because what you're going to find is that he makes millions of dollars every single year. Millions of dollars in state and local contracts. He's also involved in class action suits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars representing the state of South Carolina with the Attorney General's office, a contract with them. And let me just say this, he's not the only lawyer legislator who has these class action suits representing the state of South Carolina. You can go look at that online too. And my problem with these suits is we get absolutely no transparency whatsoever about how much work they actually do representing the state on these cases, where they make hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that's an argument for another day. What's relevant for today is, prior to being Speaker, Merle Smith was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Second legislator we're going to talk about is Representative Todd Rutherford. Why you got a problem with him? He's with his good friend Alec Murdaugh there. Well, let me tell you something. We're laughing, and I hear people. Guess who his good friend is? Merle Smith. That's right. The leader of the Democratic Party in the House. He's very good friends and loyal to the Republican Speaker of the House, Merle Smith. Which is why Todd Rutherford, and we're going to talk about this later, is on the Judicial Merit Selection Committee that helps pick your judges. And it's why he's on the House Ways and Means Committee. Next. Well, several years ago, Todd got in a little trouble because he was using the state plane that you pay for and I pay for for personal use. Okay? And there were, as you can see, the state newspaper ran an article about it. Post-Courier, Fitz News might have also. Is it a crime? Was this a crime? Probably not. I'm going to tell you as a prosecutor, no. Probably not. Was it unethical? Maybe, maybe not. But if it is unethical, here's the good news. Guess who's on the House Ethics Subcommittee to judge whether it's unethical or not? Todd Rutherford and Merle Smith are both in Now you talk about the fox garden, and you can't help but laugh at this stuff, can you? The fox garden and hen house. But let me ask you this. So it's definitely not a crime, I'm telling you. It's probably not even, I don't even know if it's unethical. It probably isn't. But is it something we should laugh about? That they should laugh about? Is it something that they should boast about? Is it something they should stick a finger in our eye about? I don't know. There were a bunch of trips. Europe, a bunch of other trips. Florida. All of them.
Did they reimburse them?
They did.
They did not.
Let's get to the next one. Then this is the third one. But again, let's keep that in mind. Is it something they should be laughing and boasting about? And we all agree now. This is the third legislator, Kirkland Finley, Republican. He's a former legislator. He's good friends with Todd Rutherford. In fact, Rutherford cannot stand the Democrat that beat Kirkland Finley 2 years ago. And you know why? Because she calls him out on his shenanigans. And guess what? That Democrat, even though the Democratic Party is not doing a good job, in my opinion, of fighting for reform yet, I think movement's happening. She was one of the first, if not the first legislators to file a bill for judicial reform to take Todd Rutherford and the other lawyers off of JMSC. And her name's Heather Bauer. Heather Bauer, out of Columbia. Finley was also a member of the Ways and Means Committee with Merle Smith and Todd Rutherford. He received some media scrutiny because he had sent $325,000 in tax money to a nonprofit run by a political ally of his. Again, crime, absolutely not. It's not, I can tell you. Unethical, probably not, because it was all out in the open. But is it something to laugh about? Is it something that Kirk Finley should be boasting about? Is it something anybody up at the State House should be laughing about? The answer is no. Well, after these stories came out, there was a hearing with the Ways and Means Committee. And at the end of the hearing, when Merle Smith tells the Ways and Means Committee, for your benefit, hey, y'all need to get ready and come back, we're going to do the work of the people. I want you to hear what they joke about at the end of this meeting. Go ahead.
Volume 50. Volume 53.
We're gonna make sure that we get the work done for the citizens of the state. So thank you very much. Mr. Finley.
Oh, geez.
Well, maybe we can fund it through your nonprofit, Mr. Clark.
That's your tax dollars you're laughing about. I just wanted to let you see a little bit of what we're dealing with and what we're going to have to fight to get judicial reform, because to me, the biggest opponents to it are going to be the Todd Rutherfords and the Merle Smiths and the Mike McCaskies of the world. Okay? And that's why we're here today. If you didn't hear it that well, you got Finley laughing, saying, hey, can we buy Todd Rutherford his own plane with state money, Ways and Means? And then you have Rutherford in the background, yeah, I want a one-seater. And then you heard Merle Smith say, well, maybe we could run it through your nonprofit. And they laugh and go home. and they pick up their per diem check, for going to Columbia that day. Laughing, no shame whatsoever, they don't care because they're immune. But at least I can say it's bipartisan. They don't pay for it, that's right, but they're gonna pay for it at the box. That's where they have to pay for it. Now, keep in mind that lack of care and concern for tax dollars and the total disregard of public service for private gain, as we discussed in General Assembly, how they pick our judges. The cornerstone of any republic, y'all learned this in the 3rd grade, is that we're supposed to have 3 independent separate branches of government. The executive, legislative, and judiciary. But arguably in South Carolina, we don't have an independent judiciary. You go ahead and go to the next one. I mean, how can you have an independent judicial branch when they're hired, fired, and solely funded by another branch of government, the legislature? All of our judges are hired, fired, and funded solely by the legislature. Next. In South Carolina, just to give you a quick tutorial, our Supreme Court judges, Court of Appeals judges, Circuit Court judges, and Master in Equity are all elected by the General Assembly. They have to go through the JMSC that we're going to talk about, and if they're found qualified, and the JMSC lets them go through to the General Assembly, that's how they're elected. The only judges that don't get elected that way that I can think of course, are probate judges elected by the people. Your summary court judges, magistrates, they're not voted for by the General Assembly, but I mean they're basically handpicked by state senators, many of whom then go and practice law in front of those magistrates. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I'm here mostly to talk about JMSC. I won't fix that problem first, okay? JMSC and how we pick our Circuit Court, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court judges. Let's go to the next. All right, the Judicial Merit Selection Committee. They have 10 members chosen by the legislature, right? 6 of them have to be legislators. Currently, the chairman of the committee is Micah Caskey from Lexington County. The vice chairman is Kevin Brackett's very good friend, Senator Luke Rankin of Horry County. All right, that's an inside joke. I got to tell you why. I go to Horry County and I take Brackett with me, right? And we team up again and we're talking about judicial reform. I give my little spiel and I have to go outside to go return some phone calls. And we had both agreed, oh, we're going to be cool, we're not going to call anybody out, we're going to be nice. Kinder, gentler, Pascoe, and Brackett.
I don't remember that.
No, he doesn't. I walk back inside, right, from the phone call, and the first words I hear are, and your Senator Luke Rankin is no friend of law enforcement. I was like, all right, okay, it's on now. Front page, everything was that Luke Rankin is no friend of law enforcement. Well, he's the vice chairman. He's been in the Senate for a good while now. Neither one of these two have any appetite for judicial reform. I'm just going to tell you that. They don't want to change it. In fact, there are bills, maybe over a dozen bills in the Senate right now. Luke Rankin is the Senate Judiciary Chairman, and he won't even bring them up to the Senate for any subcommittee or committee work whatsoever. No appetite for judicial reform. But guess who's up for election this year too? Senate. Now, let's get back to where we were. There are 10 members, 6 of them are lawyer legislators. Merle Smith appoints 3 from the House, and either Rankin or Rankin and the President Pro Tem get a total of 3 that they appoint, senators that they appoint for the Senate, okay? You get a total of 5. These are the members, 5 from the House side, 5 from the Senate. 3 are senators, 3 are House members, okay? I don't know if you can see it. You're making more sense than how.
And all are lawyers.
And all are lawyers. All 10 are lawyers, but especially,
There's a couple that are.
couple that are.
But they're all picked by the General. So it's either the General Assembly or the General Assembly's chosen representative. They're huge.
So look at the Senate side. You got Senator Rankin, lawyer, Senator Saab, lawyer, Senator Talley lawyer, and then they have, two non-senator appointments, Hope Blackley and Pete Strong, lawyer from Columbia. And then on the House side, you got Caskey lawyer, who's that one in the second one? Oh, Rutherford lawyer, third one, Jay Jordan lawyer, and then two non-House members. All right, but here's, let's do the math. All right, Jeff, you're an accountant. There are 10 people. That's a trick question. 10 people, right? If 6 of them are legislators, who controls the JMSC?
I would think the legislature.
There you go. That's right. So 6 out of 10 are legislators. So, let's see. Now, what I want to do next is talk about, go ahead, just three of the 10 members. Okay, because we want to get out of here tonight. I'm just going to talk about 3 of the 10 members. We're going to talk about Luke Rankin, Todd Rutherford, the gift that keeps on giving, and Pete Strong. All right. And I've already mentioned how Senator Rankin, he's on the JMSC because he is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's the chairman. He's the one who decides that no judicial reform bills are coming up before his committee right now. But, you know, in politics, I think it's good to see where we all come from. So let's take a quick look at how and why Luke Rankin became chairman of our Senate Judiciary. It's because of dark money and the trial lawyers. Back in 2016, Larry Martin, Republican out of the upstate, I think he's like the Pickens area.
Pickens.
Yeah, I know Larry, great guy, nice guy. He was the chairman of the judiciary. He's not a lawyer, and chairman of the judiciary. Well, the trial lawyers didn't want him to be chairman of the judiciary. And the next in line was their friend, Luke Rankin. So if you could get Larry Martin defeated in his Republican primary, Luke Rankin would become chairman of the judiciary. So guess what the trial lawyers do? They get together with Luke Rankin's political consultant, Richard Quinn and Associates. And they then, the trial lawyers, spend over $200,000 to get on Larry Martin's primary to get him defeated in his primary race in the upstate. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think the Republican voters of Pickens would have liked to have known that it was the trial lawyers spending all that money to get their senator defeated? Don't you think? Would y'all wanted to have known that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, he was defeated in a close election. And then Luke Rankin became chairman of the board. So there you go. Next. Now we're going to talk about Pete Strong, the other member of the JMS. Good guy. I like Pete Strong personally. I like him. And he was an early supporter of mine. But Pete Strong used to be president of the trial lawyers. And when he was president of the trial lawyers, hence, I mean, is it any surprise that Luke Rankin, one of his picks for the JMSC is Pete Strong? All right, but when he was president of the trial lawyers, he went to Richard Quinn and Associates, Pete did, because the trial lawyers tried to make sure that the tort reform bills that were being brought forward were watered down or wouldn't get passed. So they went to Richard Quinn and Associates to work on the legislation to water down those tort reform bills. Next, and there's an email where one of the members of the trial lawyers emails Pete Strong and says, hey, I don't have a really good feeling about Rick Quinn. I don't know that he's going to help us on tort reform like you think he is. I don't know if he's going to be loyal to our cause. And Pete Strong sums it up. As honest as the day is long. What Pete Strong says, somebody read that?
I'm not worried about his loyalty. He is no true believer. This is business.
So he is on the JMSC too. And the third person we're going to talk about on the JMSC. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more thing about Pete Strong. Hurry up. Just, when he was on JMSC, one of the most controversial judges in the state right now was before him. And he applauded her and talked about what a great asset she was to the state of South Carolina. So I just think the mindset of somebody who helps pick your judges. Okay, next. And then we have Todd Rutherford, third member of the JMSC. Todd last year, and I know in the Midlands in particular, y'all had to see this. He was in the news at one point, it seemed like every other week, with some controversial, scummy, criminal deal. Every single day. I mean, there was something. This was one out of Lexington, out of Aiken, I think they were talking about, Aiken. And yet Merle Smith continues to put them on JMSC. Next. This is just one of the cases. Gerard Price that was in the news I want to talk about. Again, I'm sure many of you recall this one. Todd Rutherford, representing a dangerous, convicted gang murderer that I put away, got a conviction at trial. Todd Rutherford went back in chambers with the judge. The judge asked him, what do you want me to sentence him to? Price had already been sentenced to serve day for day 35 years in prison. And Todd was able to convince the judge in a secret hearing in chambers to reduce his sentence. And the judge asked him, what do you want me to sentence him to? Rutherford tells him, basically time served, to get him out of prison 16 years early. The judge does it, and then they, along with the solicitor deserves a lot of heck for this too. They seal it, and that wasn't Rick Hubbard, that was in Columbia. He's staring at me. They seal it and make it a secret forever. A secret. Gerard Price, a dangerous gang murderer who wasn't even in our prison in South Carolina. You know why? Because he was running the prisons in South Carolina. So he was, we have a relationship. We sent him to New Mexico. That's how bad he is in South Carolina in our prisons. And they reduced his sentence 16 years in a secret order. Now I know the victim's parents personally very well. Carl and Lily Smalls, and they deserve better from our justice system than getting an automated call one afternoon in March of last year saying your son's murderer is being released from prison today, 16 years early. They deserve a lot more from our justice system, and they didn't know where to turn. They went to the governor's office, nothing. They went to the solicitor's office, nothing. And the reason they couldn't get any answers is because the order was sealed. Illegally, improperly sealed. This is the most egregious product of our justice system that I've seen in our 30 years, in my 30 years of prosecuting cases. We were able to get it fixed. And I went to Alan Wilson and I got him to help me, and we got it fixed. And then Lily and Carl Smalls have to listen to JMSC member Todd Rutherford on the TV every day talk about how Gerard Price is a victim. Gerard Price is a victim. It's outrageous. Next, these are the people that pick your judges. How does that make you feel? Does that give you a warm and fuzzy feeling? There's three of the people right there that pick your judges. Y'all probably seen them. There have been editorial after editorial asking to remove lawyer legislators from JMSC. Unfortunately, on deaf ears. Because I'm telling you, Merle Smith, Luke Rankin, Todd Rutherford, Mike McCaskey, they're not budging unless you make them budge. And sadly, you can count on one hand how many people I believe up at the State House have enough guts to stand up to those people. One hand. Okay, I will. Last October, Kevin and I, and 7 other solicitors, including your solicitor, Rick Hubbard, sent a letter to Merle Smith and Luke Rankin asking them that they remove the lawyer legislators from the JMSC. We received crickets, no response. Of course, they didn't do it. So last November, about a month later, Kevin and I were asked to go before Merle Smith's ad hoc committee to determine whether the state needs judicial reform. And we were asked to give the committee specific examples. They asked us, give us specific examples of preferential treatment that lawyer legislators receive in the courtroom, because many on the courtroom refused to believe that lawyer legislators got preferential treatment. They didn't believe it. Said it's not true. Caskey, others, not true. Bamberg, none of them, not true. And you know what? To their credit, there were some on that committee that didn't think it was true, and they've now since changed their mind and talked to me about it, to their credit. Well, we went up there and we gave them an earful. Kevin and I did. But they didn't just hear from Kevin Brackett and myself, they also heard from Sled Chief Mark Heel. And he told them about the horrible perception our state has in how we select our judges and the preferential treatment lawyer legislators get in court. They heard from other law enforcement, like sheriffs, who told them the same thing. And then they heard, and you'll see this later, they heard from our state's most prominent defense attorney that yes, lawyer legislators receive preferential treatment. I'll show you that in a minute. And then they also heard from the former director of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. For lawyers, he is the boogeyman. We don't like getting calls from ODC, and the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. They heard from the former director who corroborated my account to the ad hoc committee when he said that he once felt manipulated by the JMSC to come to a JMSC hearing simply to intimidate the candidate. They had him sit on the front row to intimidate the candidate. And he felt manipulated by doing that. And all the lawyer legislators did at that ad hoc committee, in my opinion, all they did was close rank. They were offended not because of the deplorable actions of some of their colleagues. They were offended that we called them out. Well, guess what? We're going to keep calling them out. And I'm going to discuss with you some of the examples of preferential treatment and evidence of how the JMSC is, in my opinion, rotten to the core. Next. And I want to get started with the most obvious form of preferential treatment, which is lawyer legislator protection from court. Okay? Currently, if you're a lawyer legislator, if you're a lawyer of the House or the Senate, you get 7 months of absolute protection from the Supreme Court. 7 months of absolute protection. Now think about that. If you're a member of any other profession, when you're not in session up at the State House, you gotta go do your job. You gotta go to work. But if you're a lawyer legislator, from January the 1st to July the 31st, with rare exception, from January 1st to July 31st, a judge cannot make a lawyer legislator come to court, whether they're in session in Columbia or not. A judge cannot make that lawyer legislator come to court. And by the way, if the legislator has meetings after July 31st, he or she will get protection for that too. But from January the 1st to July the 31st, if David Pascoe wants to try to, or if the judge wants to try to get a lawyer legislator to come to her courtroom to have a hearing on a matter, can't do it. Absolute protection for 7 straight months. Exactly. And I'm not saying lawyer legislators shouldn't get protection. They absolutely should. But this, in my opinion, is too extreme. And I've told to his face, Chief Justice Beatty, that. I've told him that. And it leads to abuse. Some abuses that I'm going to talk about. Back on January the 6th of 2022, when I went to Greenville, some of the abuses I talked about and how it creates horrible optics, and about how defendants know this and the defendants play the system. I talked about how my office had a criminal domestic violence case ready for trial. The witnesses were ready to go, some of them from out of town. But on the eve of trial, the defense attorney for that defendant went and got a lawyer legislator for co-counsel. And the judge had to continue the case. I'm talking about on the Friday before the trial. And the judge had no choice. I can't get mad at the judge. She couldn't do it because the lawyer legislator was on it. I told the Greenville GOP how the Charleston Solicitor's Office had a very serious felony DUI trial set for January of that year. It had been set for a while with the victim's family members from across the country scheduled to attend. 2 or 3 weeks before the January trial date, the lead defense attorney announced, we aren't going to trial. The judge didn't announce that. The defense attorney, we aren't going to trial. I've assigned a lawyer legislator for my office, and he's protected through July. It was Dion Tedder, I think, was that legislator. The case had been pending for nearly 3 years when Tedder, the legislator, was assigned on the eve of trial. The head of the firm, a renowned criminal defense attorney, announced that he was assigning all his criminal cases to that lawyer legislator, So all the cases were continued for the rest of the year. And the judge had no choice but to continue. So honestly, I cannot understand anyone who says lawyer legislators don't get preferential treatment when they go to the courtroom in South Carolina. Anyway, I bring all that up because that was in January. I brought those stories up on January the 6th, which was a Thursday night. Friday, it was reported on Fitz News, and it was reported in some other media outlets. I think the Post and Courier actually reported it. And lo and behold, oh, there you go. On Tuesday, the very next Tuesday, for the first time in my 30 years of practicing law, the Chief Justice curbed lawyer legislator protection. And that was a big deal to me. It was a big deal to prosecutors, a big deal to judges. Judges were calling me and talking about it. We thought it was great. But that next day on Wednesday, I got a call from a very good friend of mine who's a state senator. I'm not going to tell y'all who it is because you'll run me out of here. And we discussed it. And he commented to me that he thought it was a great thing too. You know, he's a lawyer. He said, this is pretty awesome. I'm glad the Chief Justice did this. But he said, quote, we'll see how long it lasts. I said, what are you talking about? How long it lasts? What, the Chief Justice's order. He said, well, I was just up at the State House because they were in session. And I ran into some House members who are on Ways and Means. And they told me they are upset. You didn't use that word. They're mad at the Chief Justice in that order. And I said, well, tough. It's the order. It is what it is. So my office started putting bond revocations together in trials, dockets. And a couple of them, not many, but some of them did have lawyer legislators on the docket for the court. You know, because there were cases over 3 years old. And then the judge calls me, my circuit court judge, and she tells me we can't put lawyer legislator cases on the docket. I said, what are you talking about? You got a Chief Justice order that says we can put them on there. She said, we got an email from court administration telling us to ignore that order. I said, an email? When? She said the next day, on Wednesday. Now, maybe it's a coincidence, but I don't know. It's not a coincidence that a state senator tells me, we'll see how long it lasts, because I just saw some House members on Ways and Means, and they're upset with you with this, about this order. And that same day he's telling me that, the judges are getting an email. I've never heard of that either. An email trumping north saying disregard that order. Yes.
The order, by the way, was publicly placed on the website through the judicial system, so everybody could see it. The email, however,
Good point.
that was not put on the website. Nobody got to see that. It was like, we're not putting up with this anymore, and then the next day, here we are.
And I could be wrong, but I don't even think it went to all the judges. I think it just went to the chief administrative judges in every circuit. Yeah, the next day. Unbelievable. Well, there's, and then articles, because then the other thing is, so they were going by an email, not an order for months. It wasn't until at least February, March, the Chief Justice issued another order. So, yeah, that order was still out there for months. So what I was doing, I was telling my lawyers to still put the cases on the docket, because I'm not gonna let an email trump an order. Now, of course, but I just did it out of the record, because there was no order for months. Next. All right. So another example of lawyer legislator preferential treatment that I just think is just horrible. I think it's absolutely horrible. And we talked to the ad hoc committee about this. This is a criminal case out of Charleston called State versus Larkin. Who controls the docket in South Carolina? Easy answer, the courts. And they should always be the last word when it comes to the docket. Not the solicitors. I heard Micah Caskey or somebody trying to say, y'all just want to control that. No, I don't. The courts need to control the docket. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it is in the other 49 states, and that's the way it is in the federal system. The chief administrative judge for the civil and criminal courts are ultimately in charge of the order of the cases. But in South Carolina, chief administrative judges for like Lexington County don't control the order of the cases when it comes to lawyer legislator cases. And this transcript out of Charleston highlights that. Representative Leon Stavronakis out of Charleston, House member, Democrat, he has 3 cases on the docket whatever day this was. But he's protected because they're in session. And he knows it and the court knows it. A very good judge by the name of Judge Young is a circuit court judge here in all the criminal cases. And he sees Mr. Stavronakis out there. And Judge Young tells Representative Stavronakis, or says to him, we were told that the Larkin bond revocation matter, we were told that it isn't going because you're protected. And Stavronakis replied, that is correct. And Judge Young, which by itself is a bad look. You're supposed to be protected. And there's a bond revocation matter. And what a bond, do y'all know what a bond revocation is? We'll give you an example. Rick Hubbard has a guy, he's arrested for armed robbery. And the magistrate gives him a $100,000 bond. The defendant is then rearrested for possession with intent to distribute guns and drugs and a gun charge. And he gets back out on bond for another $50,000 bond. Rick Hubbard is going to move to revoke his bond on the armed robbery and get his butt locked up in jail where he needs to be because he's out committing crimes while he's out on bond. Those are, so my point being, bond revocations are important matters where the solicitor believes that this person needs to be in jail. Okay? So that's what's going on with this defendant. I don't even know what this defendant is charged with, but the solicitor in this case believes that defendant needs to be in jail because he is a menace to society. And Judge Young says to Stavronakis, we were told it isn't going because you're on protection. Stavronakis says that is correct. Judge Young then asks him, okay, then why are you here? Why are you here? And Stavronakis tells the judge, it's up there in the transcript, that he's waiving his protection to do a guilty plea that he wants to do, the legislator, but he's not going to let the court go forward on the 2 or 3 bond revocation matters he has before the court. He is now directing the court what cases I'm going to let you call. We're going to call this guilty plea I want to do, but I'm not going to let you call these 2 bond revocations. That's horrible. That's not right. That is not right. The judge tells him, I haven't seen that in the order, but that doesn't seem like it's in the spirit of things, but there was nothing the judge could do. Nothing he could do. Now, let me ask you this. I see how the optics of that are in here. It's horrible. But how do you think the optics of that exchange are in the court? With the solicitors in the courtroom. How do you think the optics were in that courtroom with victims sitting in that courtroom? And other defendants sitting in that courtroom watching, well, they're going to lawyer legislator, he can stop the judge from hearing that defendant's case. And was there any outrage from the ad hoc committee when Kevin and I went and testified? I didn't see it. Jimmy, just slide, do the telephone story. I'm going to speed this up and let you go. Do the telephone story. Go straight to Christy Harrington.
It's a telephone story.
Oh, really? Is it a good one? Okay. All
Well,
right.
I don't know that they'll understand.
Well, I'll cut it short. Here's just another example of a lawyer legislator getting preferential treatment. This happened, I just found out about it in November, okay? All right, defense. No, it wasn't Dorchester. It was- Yeah, maybe. They're supposed to be cut, but yeah. Shoot, the defense attorney was Todd Rutherford too, I'm also saying. All right, so defendant was arrested for he was already out on bond for drugs in one county, and he got arrested for drug trafficking. I think it was heroin. No, it might be just bond. It was heroin. Oh, there you go. It was heroin. That's what happens when I don't read it and I try to go fast. It's only 10 minutes longer now. He's arrested for trafficking heroin, and that's a pretty darn serious charge. The judge is looking for the assistant solicitor. Assistant solicitor who's the prosecutor of the case. The prosecutor comes in his chambers. He says, look, my good friend Todd Rutherford represents this defendant. He's in for, what's his charge? Because Todd can't be here for his bond hearing. And I want to know his charges. The prosecutor said, well, he's in there for trafficking heroin. And the judge said, I'm going to give him a bond. Here's the point about that. Not only does he give him a bond, go ahead, next one. I couldn't tell. He says he's gonna give him a bond, and he does give him a bond that day via telephone. The guy had a 1992 conviction for voluntary manslaughter, went to prison for 20 years. A 2007 conviction for trafficking heroin, went to prison again for 7 years. And he was out on bond when he committed allegedly this trafficking offense. So, quote, I'm gonna give him a bond. And where the story, that's crazy enough in itself, and then he did give him a bond, but the really crazy part of the story is the judge had his phone sent down to the holding cell.
His personal
his
cell
personal
phone.
cell phone. Hold on, so the defendant could talk to his lawyer. The judge allowed someone who was convicted of killing someone and convicted of drug trafficking to use his phone in a holding cell so he could talk to his lawyer. So when I heard people the week before we testify say that Florida legislators don't get preferential treatment, I'm like, I've never heard of that.
A cell phone, by the way, is contraband in every detention center in the state of South
Yeah.
Carolina.
Yeah.
If you're caught with one, you're in possession of contraband.
Why don't you just give them some heroin too?
Question, we'll check it back and figure it out.
Give him a stash back at least, you know.
And I told y'all, so they heard from me, and they heard from Brackett, and they heard from Mark Keel and others. Yes, they get preferential treatment. Yes, they get preferential treatment. Then they had Jack Swerlin, who is the most prominent criminal defense attorney in my lifetime, probably in the history of our state, quite frankly. I agree. Nobody's tried more murders. We're just saying that because we've all beaten them.
Makes us look
And makes us look good. But he's the best, and he's the best I've ever gone up against. And I love the dude. He's been a good friend of mine for many, many years. I was the prosecutor on the case where the person broke into his home and bound him up with duct tape, put a gun to his head, and was gonna kill him. Got life for that guy. But anyway, so they want to hear from Jack Swerlin. And I think they were shocked when Jack Swerlin told them. Jack Swerlin is not mince words. He's very flippant, and he told them the truth. And this was his answer about whether lawyer legislators get preferential treatment.
Prison settings, that they've got some influence through the judges that other lawyers don't have. How do I know that? How do I know that's happening? It's happening because my clients tell me it's happening. When I sit and Ms. Benvenuto and I were talking about it yesterday, I have clients that come in and say, well, can you do what so-and-so does? Can you get the sentence that so-and-so does? Can you delay my cases for 2 years, like so-and-so can? And so I hear that from clients who come to see me. I also hear it from other lawyers who are dealing with the same kind of situation. They hear it from their prospective clients, that there are people who are lawyer legislators who may not be saying it because you have to take that with a grain of salt. People may come in and just say, well, so-and-so said this, so-and-so can do this. I don't accept all of that as true, but if it is true, it's wrong. And we have to clean that up. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the public perception, that certain lawyers have influence in the courts, more than other lawyers do.
I know it because my clients tell me it goes on. Most prominent defense attorney in the state. I don't think that some members of that ad hoc committee appreciated that too much either. I'm going to close now by talking about one case where I believe proves just how rotten to the core the JMSC process is. All right, this is a case involving a judicial candidate. This is Judge Christy Harrington. She's a judge from 2008 to 2018. She was known to be a no-nonsense, hard-nosed, hard-working judge for the state of South Carolina. She was a tough sentencer, pretty tough sentencer. When she was up for re-election and re-screening before the JMSC, and that was going to occur in November of 2017. Okay, so keep that in mind. November of 2017, she's going to have to go in front of that 10-member panel. She had already been found well qualified by the Citizens Committee. She was unopposed in her race. Nobody was even running against her. And she had been repeatedly told by the JMSC, by her JMSC lawyer, but by the JMSC, you're going to be fine. You got nothing to worry about. Nobody's even filed an official complaint against you. You're gonna be fine. Honestly, the only bad thing that I can personally say about Christy Harrington was that before she was a judge, she was president of the Berkeley Republican Women. Vice president of the state Republican Women, and she was a delegate to the Republican National Convention. That's the only bad thing that I can think of. And that's the only reason I can think of next why these two real Republicans would be against her too. Because they helped make sure that she withdrew her candidacy, and I'm going to explain to you why. In August of 2017, so what's that, September, October, November, about 3 months before she's supposed to go before the panel. She's unopposed with no formal complaints. She's told it's going to be smooth sailing. She's been elected and re-elected already at least 2 times before. November comes along where she goes before the JMSC, and all of a sudden she's forced to withdraw from the race. So what happened between August and November? The reported story is that she was grilled by the JMSC. It was actually reported by Fitz News probably more than anybody else. They forced her to withdraw after grilling her about her demeanor on the bench, her student loans, and at one point threatened prosecution of her until she stepped down from the race. They literally read her rights. Go read the articles. State newspaper, Post and Courier, Fitz News, brutal. But let me tell you what wasn't reported. And that was the purpose of our ad hoc testimony. Micah Caskey, who lives in his district, and your representative, I'm inviting you, go read what the reports are. It's about her demeanor and all that. But I wanted the ad hoc committee, go back to her slide real fast. We wanted them to hear what the other side of the story was, which was Christy Harrington's side. Which was to discuss how the JMSC had that ODC director I told you about, John Nichols, sit on the front row of her hearing to intimidate her, use her like a prop. And what Harrington believes is the reason her unopposed candidacy was under JMSC attack. That's what I'm going to tell you about today. This is why she thinks she was forced to withdraw. This is Peter McCoy. I used to have a good relationship with him, probably not so anymore. He's the former chairman of the judiciary, and he was a member of the JMSC. A good guy, and not corrupt. I'm not saying he's corrupt at all. But the never told story of Christy Harrington is why we need to change the way we pick our judges. Again, lawyer legislators don't have protection in August, right? So good judges like Harrington, that's when you start scheduling lawyer legislators' cases in August. Well, Peter McCoy was first up for a murder trial in Berkeley County in August of 2017. On a Monday, August of 2017, he was first up. On that Friday, the eve of trial, right before the trial's going to start, with out of town witnesses, McCoy asked Harrington for a continuance. She didn't believe he had grounds for a continuance in her opinion. He didn't have legislative protection, and the prosecutor objected because, again, it was an old case. We got witnesses coming in from out of town. So she denied the continuance motion. And she knew Peter McCoy was mad. And that afternoon, remember this is August, just 3 months before she has to go before JMSC. That afternoon, she called up another judge, a good friend of hers. And she told that judge, I think I'm in trouble. I think I'm in trouble. I didn't give Peter McCoy a continuance. And what I try to tell those people on the ad hoc committee is that by itself, whether the rest of the story is true, whether that's the reason she didn't become a judge or not, that story by itself is why we have to change our system. A judge should never worry about whether they offended a legislator or not because they didn't give a continuance. That by itself, that's all you need to change the system. Never should they be looking over their shoulders. That is not an independent judiciary. But there's more. Harrington contacts the JMSC again. That Monday, I think she told me. And they told her, no, you're fine. Nobody's even filed a complaint against you. You get smooth sailing come November. But again, that shows you her mentality. I didn't give a lawyer legislator a continuance. Am I going to be in trouble? And then that following Tuesday, you got Friday, Monday, then on Tuesday, she gets a phone call from a Democratic legislator, a Democrat from Charleston, Leon Stavronakis. Again, it's always the same names. Anyway, and and Stavronakis asked her, "What did you do to upset Peter so much? I was with him and Merle, and he's mad at you. I've never seen him so mad." She didn't give me continuance. 4 months later, when she goes before JMSC, she's berated, threatened, read her rights, had the ODC director propped up to intimidate her, and she withdrew from the race. We have got to change the way we pick our judges in this state. And a couple more things on that. Guess whose spouse, the same time Christy Harrington was running for re-election, had to withdraw? Guess whose spouse breezed through JMSC and became a judge that same year? Peter McCoy's wife. That's why Micah Pascoe loved it. When I tell you, in fairness, Peter McCoy wasn't on JMSC when Christie was running, but the reason he wasn't on it was because his wife was running for judge. And it's beyond disbelief to think that they still don't talk to each other, they're not best friends and part of their little club. Oh, and a year later, when there was an election for Christy Harrington's seat, guess whose best friend was elected to her seat? Peter McCoy's. Peter McCoy spoke at his investiture. Go Google McCoy and Bentley Price, because Bentley Price is the judge who took over for Christy Harrington, and look at all the deals Mr. McCoy got when Price was the judge.
Bentley's the guy who sent his cell phone down to the jail to let the inmates make calls.
I didn't say it right. I told you, man, I bring Brackett, and he's just, I said, we gotta be nice, we're not gonna say the names yet. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I love it. Anyway, I'm done. The consequences of the system, and Kevin's gonna touch on this more. The bottom line is you got judges looking over their shoulders, and we can't have that. We got a good judiciary, I promise y'all. But it'd be a lot better if they're not looking over their shoulders thinking, wonder whether they're offending our Lord legislator next. It's got to be a better way. There is a better way. Kevin Brackett's going to talk to you about the better way to do it. There are, as I said, and we just put two of them. That's Joseph White from Newberry, Republican. That's the Heather Bauer I told you all about, the Democrat. There are two of the legislators in the House that have legislation calling for judicial reform. Ever since then, there have been a litany of others. I know Wes Palmer, his senator, Dick Harpootlian, the senator in freaking Richland County, the boogeyman. He is sponsoring legislation to take lawyer legislators off of the JMSC. Now, how bad is it if Dick wants to take that? I had a great time. I'm going to stick around and answer questions. Without further ado, my cohort, Kevin Brackett.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to start by saying, how many of you watch the Peanuts comic strip? You see that when Charlie Brown goes to catch the football and Lucy always takes it away and he goes up in the air and lands on his back, right? So this is like the fourth time I think I've done something with David, and he's always like, "Let me go first. I'm only going to take like 20 minutes. You'll have tons of it. It's all good." And I'm like, "Okay, go ahead. You go first." And every time the football's pulled away, and I'm on my butt, wondering what in the heck happened.
15 minutes.
So I got a slideshow too, and I want to get to questions because I've done this before, and there's always a lot of questions. But I want to, before I launch into it, I'm going to blast through this really fast, I promise. Before I do, I just want to remind you a couple of things, and David touched on that as well. But how many of you took civics in high school? Civics. I mean, all the older people, because about 1970 they stopped calling it civics and it became government or something else. So civics is, how does our government function? How is it set up? How is it supposed to function? And there's supposed to be three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And they're supposed to be co-equal, and they're supposed to serve as a check and a balance on each other, so that no one branch of government can dominate the other two. Each one has its own unique powers. The heart and soul of an independent judiciary, of judiciary's power, is its independence. It is not a co-equal branch of government if it is hired fired and paid. That is not a peer, that is an employee. And we cannot expect our state government to function as it's supposed to if we don't have 3 co-equal branches of government. The legislature dominates South Carolina. And it struck me as so odd, when we went before that panel, one of the guys, who was it that was sitting there going, our state was set up for the legislature to dominate. That's how it's supposed to be. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Who said that?
Former solicitor.
Was it Ron?
Yeah.
I'm looking, I couldn't remember, but I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not how the founding fathers set up our republic. They set it up with 3 co-equal branches of government. Now, I understand why they don't want to give up the power to control the judiciary. Who is the only one who is opposed to putting a fence around the hen house? The fox. The chickens and the farmer are sold. They see the value in the fence. But the fox, all he sees is trouble. And he comes up with all kinds of crazy excuses like they did when we went in front of him. They talk about, well, how is it gonna work if we do it that way? Well, then just somebody else is gonna have that power and it'll be the same. And I was like, well, I could think of 3 ways right now, off the top of my head, that we could diffuse the authority and prevent anybody from dominating the judiciary. And I promise you, you get 4 or 5 like-minded people in a 12-pack, I'll come up with a dozen more before the end of the night. We can do this. It's not that hard, and I'll talk about that at the end. We were invited, as David said, to talk about specific examples. Well, everybody's talking about what a terrible system it is, and we don't understand why we haven't heard any of these problems, so what are you talking about? You need to be more specific and give us some concrete examples. So we went, and they didn't really want to hear that. It was like, we want you to do this, but we don't really want you to do this, because it's going to be embarrassing. As you'll see, we named names. We talked about specific people, so go ahead and hit. I'm just gonna go through these real fast. David Morgan was a guy who shot up a nightclub in Rock Hill. Multiple people in a parking lot, people diving for cover, bullets flying everywhere. David Morgan has a record dating back to the late 80s. He's just like been in trouble, been in and out of prison his whole life. And one night he goes to this nightclub and he pulls a gun out and he gets upset with the bouncers because they ran him off because he was probably looking at the women wrong or something. And he opens fire in the parking lot. People are diving for cover. Like I said, it's terrible. He's charged with attempted murder. He goes to trial, or doesn't go to trial. He goes to plea. Now, who's representing him? Todd Rutherford. His record was so bad. He had been in prison for assaults and doing similar behavior before. No reason to expect that he wouldn't get a lengthy prison sentence, except for the fact that Todd was on the side. Now, David Morgan did one good thing that I know of in his life. He may have done others, but I know of one good thing that he did. He fathered Jadavion Clowney. That's, David Chili Bean Morgan is Jadavion Clowney's father. So that's how he could afford Todd Rutherford. Todd Rutherford comes in and he basically got a time served sentence. He had to do a small amount of time, but walked out of court. Nobody in there, everybody sitting in there. We all know what a case is worth and what the right sentence should be. We spend our lives in court. We deal with these people all the time. He got a ridiculously low sentence. Senator Carl Allen, senator from Greenville, South Carolina, had a bunch of cases at one time in Union. I think he doesn't take cases there anymore because I don't think he likes to deal with me. I would hound him to get in there. His cases would get so old, and we're judged on how old our docket is. They publish a big thing and tell us, you know, this is how many of your cases are old, you need to get on these cases. So we really take that seriously in the 16th Circuit. We drive it home, we need to move these old cases, get them in there. But they're protected 7 months out of the year, and you try to find them in the other 5 months, because I'm telling you what, all they gotta do is say legislature. And the judge goes, oh, well, if you've got some kind of, you need to be in Columbia. Well, yes, sir, Senator, absolutely, we're not gonna. So I had a couple of cases with him in Union, and I said, Carl, any time in the month of September that is convenient to you, sir, you pick the day, I will be in Union to do these 2 pleas. Just tell me the day and the time and I'll be there. So he came back and said, okay, this is like 2 months in advance. I'll be there September 14th, you be there, blah, blah, blah. I show up to court, his client sitting on the front row, no sign of call. It's like 9:30, 10. 10:30, no sign or call. I go to the client, have you heard from your lawyer? No, I haven't heard from him. Would you call your lawyer? Okay, I'll call him. I don't get an answer in his office. Another hour goes by. I go to the judge. I'm here, I got this case ready, we're supposed to go. Carl picked the day and the time, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. No answer, no answer, no answer. So the judge finally says to his law clerk, he says, call his office and see if you can find him. His law office says, we don't know where he's at, and we don't have a phone number for him. I'm like, what the hell kind of office is that? You don't have any way of contacting your boss? No, we don't have any way. Well, an hour later, I'm in court, still waiting. His client's on the front row, because I'm not letting him go. Carl might show up, so I say, you gotta stay. I'm sitting here, you're sitting here. We wait. Finally, I see his law clerk stand up off the bench holding his phone. He looks down at his phone, he points at it, and he looks at me, and he's like, it's Carl. Oh! You know, the clouds parted, and Carl has decided to join us. So I run back in the back, and I'm listening to the law clerk talk to Carl. Now, this is the judge's law clerk. Now, when you're talking to the law clerk, it's like you're talking to the judge. If the judge tells his law clerk to call you, you're as respectful to the law clerk as you would be to the judge. Because he's just gonna go back and say whatever you told him to the judge, right? I get back there and I hear him say, yes, sir, well, you said that, and the judge asked me to give you a call because you were supposed to be here, and I just was wondering if you were on your way or where you were gonna be. And I hear through the speaker, how dare you call me? I'm busy, I've been blah, blah, blah. Do I need to call Gene Toll, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and tell him, blah, blah, you tell the judge, no, I'm not gonna be there today. And I'm like, holy smokes, who talks to a judge that way? A senator, that's who, because he doesn't care. Nothing's gonna happen to him. And it's shown over and over and over again. These guys get special treatment. And it's disgusting to us because we're supposed to be working for the victims. You all, the average citizen who gets, beaten, robbed, mugged, shot, raped, murdered, loved one. Y'all come to our offices and you're looking for help. And most of the time it works like it's supposed to. But when you have a lawyer legislator, it doesn't. Except for a few. And I'll say, the one that he wasn't gonna mention the name of, Senator Harpootlian, I'll mention him. He took time out of his busy schedule to go try a case last year in Hampton County, South Carolina, for what, 4 weeks? 5 weeks?
That's more than that. That's
6?
6.
Yeah. He found the time to do that, so if he can do it, they'll find time to come to court for a bond hearing, to get their client out of jail. Doesn't matter what time of year it is, they'll find the time to do that. But to come to court to do a guilty plea, to do a trial, it's not gonna happen. And who waits and sits and waits? Is there any movement on my case? Is there any movement on the case? I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. We're sick of it, that's why we're here. We're tired of it, because we don't know what to tell people like you. We don't know what to say anymore. And we can't change it. There's nothing we can do except stand up in front of y'all and say, please help us. Please get out there and talk to your legislators and tell them you're sick of it. And you want to change. And this needs to change. And I'll talk a little bit about how. Jeremy Trevio Saxon is out of Greenwood, another horrible gangbanger, been in and out of prison since he was 18 years old, been charged in 2 murders. Both times got away with it because witnesses all of a sudden didn't want to come to court and testify. Finally, in a strong case, stabbed a guy, nearly killed him. If EMS hadn't literally been parked down the street from where he stabbed him, then the guy would have died. Carl Allen represents him. Nobody in their right mind would expect somebody with this kind of record doing that kind of crime to walk out of court. But he did. Carl Allen, by his side, got probation. He's in prison right now. And his gang went back and finished the job on the guy he stabbed and killed him out. Kieran Marcellus Dennis. This is the cookout case from Lexington. And I gave a little spiel about that, but I'm in no position to best my friend, Mr. Hubbard over here. Solicitor Hubbard actually tried the case, so I would ask you, if you don't mind, telling me a little bit
I
about
appreciate it, because I can listen to these guys. Y'all understand why my colleagues are traveling all over, and you can see why. They're passionate and so am I. But what's going on is in this county too. Kieran Dennis, just a 19-year-old kid, stabs Devon Capers in the chest, an 18-year-old kid at cookout. We get so many cases like this. But Karen Dennis had Todd Rutherford. We go all roundabout with bond hearings, bond violations. We weren't gonna be able to revoke his bond. Many times as this guy ignored what the judge told him to do. Finally, 4 years after the stabbing, which happened February 2014, 4 years later in 2018, I'm like, Judge, for God's sake, we need a trial date. I gotta try this guy. We gotta try him. So the judge in March says, you know what, I know Mr. Rutherford's protected from January to July, but in March, he says, I'm gonna send out an email, and sends an email to me and to Todd Rutherford. He says, I'm gonna give you a choice of 2 dates in October when you're free. October 15th or the 29th, pick. I immediately respond, either one, I'll be there. Rutherford says, October 15th works for me. That's his email response. July, we make sure the judge puts it in the form of an order. Both parties agree, this will be October 15th, by consent of both parties. I get a copy, Mr. Rutherford gets a copy. That's in July. September, I send a letter. Hey, just a reminder for you, next month, show up in court. We got a trial. The day after my letter goes out, my colleague who's helping me sends an email. Hey, Mr. Rutherford, remember, the trial's next month. If you need anything, logistically, we'll help you. October 1st, now it's the month for trial. My colleague sends an email to him and says, hey, we understand you want an out-of-state witness. We've already helped you. We got your out-of-state subpoenas. We've located your witness. We can get him here from Alaska. He's in the military. We'll get him here for you. 3 days later, October 4th, I get an email from the judge. Here's a motion for a continuance. Mr. Rutherford says he didn't know there was going to be a trial. I'm like, I want a hearing in the courtroom. I want a hearing in the courtroom. Well, guess who could not come into court that week or the next week? In fact, it was after the trial date before we had a hearing on the continuance, October 24th. I go in there and I have the family. Talk about victims. This family is dying. The dad worked at Herndon Chevrolet. He would see the defendant drive by every day. Every day. And he kept saying, why should I trust you? I'm like, hang on, it'll be all right. They're there in the courtroom with me. My witnesses, a bunch of young kids who saw the murder, are there, learning about this system that we have. Is it fair? They're there. Guess who's not there? Todd Rutherford. About an hour plus goes by. Finally, he shows up. And he comes in and he says, Judge, like I said, I didn't know anything about this case. You know, I've got other stuff to do. I can't try it, so you're just going to have to continue. I respond by saying, let me show you some emails, Judge. His response to your email. Todd cuts me off. He is so angry. He stands up and screams at me in open court. Sit down and shut up, is what I hear from a fellow attorney. Anybody else would go to jail for that. Anybody else. The judge goes, well, maybe I sent that email in May to the wrong address. And I said, well, you know what? Maybe you did, but a miracle occurred because Todd Rutherford answered it. And you know, the judge knew. And I don't blame him. And he continued the case, and y'all have heard about how long it takes to get him in court? A year later, before I can try him. We tried him, convicted his man, but 5 years. My victims, it took everything they could do, all the control they had, not to take matters in their own hands. And one of the kids, who was one of my witnesses at that stabbing, comes up to me and goes, this is BS, I'm never going to appear in court. I couldn't get him after that. I lost a witness. They said, this system is BS. That is Lexington, that is in our backyard. This is just one little snapshot of what's going on. And I am absolutely livid.
Who was the judge?
It was, I told the judge I wouldn't tell because, and here's why.
Makes a difference.
He is a good judge.
We only got
Well-
one, don't we?
Well, I will tell you this, here's why. The judges know there's probably no chance in hell the system's gonna change. And they know what happened to Chrissy Harrington, and there's several others, Tommy Russo and some others that are gone. And they basically are apologetic, just look, this isn't the day to fight that. You're gonna get your day in court, it's just gonna be a year later. That's Lexington. Thank you.
Those judges struggle with this just like we do.
They
I
hate
can't
it.
say it, but they're just like Christy Herring, just like Rick said.
Our judges support what we're doing quietly. They will not speak publicly, one, judges don't do that, but two, they know that'll be the end of their career.
And delay, just like Jack Swerling said in that video, that's a marketable service that you can sell to your clients. You can go out and say, I can keep you out of court all this time. And like Rick said, our cases are not like wine, they do not get better with age. Witnesses disappear, evidence, all these folks forget things, important little details, they want to drag it out. That's the whole point of it. So absolutely, this is something that they can turn around and say, hey, I can do something for you no other lawyer can. That's why you're gonna pay a little bit more for me, because I've got something they don't. I've got 7 months a year of protection and more than that, because all they have to do is say they've got some committee hearing or some meeting in the off season, and no judge is gonna come to court. And all the defendants know this. We got 30 kilos of fentanyl in fall of 2022. We found in a house in York County. Big fentanyl ring. Fentanyl, terrible drug, killing 5 people a day in South Carolina. 5 people, and it's gonna go worse. It's gonna go up from there. 30 kilos of fentanyl. Found the top 3 guys hired Todd Rutherford, Seth Rose, and Dick Harpootlian, all in the legislature. They know who to go to. They know who to pay. You know, this is a value. They know. The bad news for them, because at the time we didn't have a fentanyl trafficking statute. I'll tell you just one second. We didn't have a fentanyl trafficking statute in South Carolina, so the feds took it. And guess what a federal judge has? Lifetime tenure. They don't have to go in front of the JMSC, and they don't give a rat's butt what committee you're on, or who you are, or anything else. When they schedule the case for trial, you better be there. Well, that's what the marshal's looking for.
Now, protection doesn't work.
Yeah.
They don't have protection for federal court. Believe it or not, check this out. I found this out last month. One of the lawyer legislators tried to use that state protection for federal court. I heard it didn't go too well. It was Stavernakis.
Yeah. Went over like this. Just stared at it. Federal judges are pretty strict. So, even the criminal defendants know that's where you go when you get in trouble. If you've got the money and you can afford it, that's where you go. And I almost hate coming to groups like this because we stream it and we're telling all this, and more people are out there taking notes. Rutherford, Rose, we're drumming up business for them. Next slide, let's see what I got here. This is the last case. This is State versus Hawthorne, and I like to talk about this just because it's not a case I'm prosecuting, but it is pending, so I'm not going to talk too much about the facts, except to say it involves the allegation against Evan Hawthorne is that he murdered, beat to death Larry Vaughn, who was a friend of mine. He was a just retired lieutenant from the Rock Hill Police Department, a great guy who had worked all his life as a police officer, had just retired, and shortly after that encountered Mr. Hawthorne, and Mr. Hawthorne was ultimately charged in his death. His case is being handled by the 7th Circuit Solicitor's Office because I have a conflict of interest. He's represented initially by Jack Swerling, who goes not once, but twice before a circuit judge in about a year before, trying to get a bond for Mr. Hawthorne. Jack Swerling, whose name has come up several times now, and I will reiterate, is the Muhammad Ali of the criminal defense bar. He is the man. Both times shot down. Then, in November of 2022, we get an email from Todd Rutherford saying, hey, slightly before this, we found out Todd's involved, and he says, we'd like to schedule a bond hearing, and we want to specifically set it for more than a month from now. They picked the date and, say we want to get that in the morning on this day. Todd wants his bond hearing. We go through Jack Swerling writes back and says, I can't be there. I'm in a murder trial in Lancaster County. I won't be able to be there. We'll have to pick another day. Todd writes back, takes Jack off, says, my client waives Jack's presence. Jack doesn't need to be there.
Takes Jack off the email.
Off the email.
So Jack can't see it.
Jack can't see it. Well, the prosecutor from the Seventh Circuit adds his name back in. His name appears and says, well, what does Jack say? Does Jack waive his presence? Because he's the lawyer and you'd think he'd have a voice in all this. And Jack writes back and says, well, I guess if they don't want me, I don't need to be there if he doesn't want me, but I need that in writing from my client. So more time passes and towards the end of the month, we get something saying, yes, I don't mind if Jack's not there. Go ahead, I want my bond hearing. So then I reach out to the victims, because every time I talk to them, because I'm handling the victim piece of it, I'm still involved to that extent, just communicating with them, letting them know the court dates are set. Said they want a bond hearing on the 13th. How's that work for you? Larry Vaughn has 2 young daughters, one of whom's in college, and she'll be in the middle of final exams. And they tell me, no, please don't do that. She's doing her finals. This is gonna shatter her. It's every time she comes to court, it's devastating. Please, can we just put it off until she's not in the middle of finals? And I report that back to the court, and my local judge says, okay, well, we're not gonna do that. We can pick another day. So I call the family and say, no, you're good to go. Tuesday the 13th, the Friday before Tuesday the 13th, at 3 in the afternoon, I get an email saying, the other judge who's gonna be in town that day said he'll hear the bond hearing. And I'm like, I already told the family no. They've had no notice. I called the first judge. He's like, well, I don't want to step on the second judge's toes. Really, maybe he didn't want to step on Todd's toe. Bond hearing went down. And where Jack failed not once but twice to get a bond, guess what happened when Todd went up to bat? He got a $100,000 bond out the door now. And his victims, well, what are they supposed to think about that? You know, what are they supposed to think? And what are we supposed to say to them? I mean, I don't even know what to say. So you heard about Christy Harrington. Now I'm going to tell you the sad story of Tommy Russo, a great judge from Florence County. Been on the bench for many, many years. He was up for screening and re-election. His screening was in 19. He was going to be up for a vote in February of 20. So how it works, we didn't tell you a whole lot about this, but how it works is if I want to be a judge, they announce the openings in the summer. So I file by July, they get my application, then they go through this screening process and they solicit all these opinions from lawyers and other people. Is he a good guy? They do a financial background check on me, they do a criminal check, they check, yeah, am I a good guy, should I be a judge? They do all that during the fall. Then they schedule the actual hearings in November. And then the election, if you make it out of screening, and only 3 candidates come out of the JMSC at screening. So this is how it really works. If 10 people apply to be the judge of Lexington, you got an open seat here, 10 people apply. Only 3 are going to come out. 7 are going to be told, thanks for playing, but you're not a candidate. We're not screening you out. So how they can work it is, they got the guy they want and 2 weak candidates that don't have the juice to get the votes. So they pick the judge in JMSC many times. So that's how it works. But they'll go and do their screening, and the person comes in and they sit down and they question them and so forth and so on. So Tommy Russo's up for election, and his term is going to end at the end of June 2020. So he's got to be re-elected in February of 2020, which means he's got to be re-screened in November of 2019. He files in July like normal, goes through the screening process of gathering all the information. They interview him, the bar does all their things that they're doing, blah, blah, blah. They send it all through. Everything seems to be fine. Nobody filed in opposition to him, which is usually a sign that somebody might be in trouble. If you're a sitting judge and somebody runs against you, that means that somebody doesn't like you and you might not win. So, but nobody had filed against him. He met with a lawyer from JMSC. They assign a lawyer to him who's a committee lawyer. No problems, everything's fine, seems to be routine, everything's good. What happened though was there was a problem. Judge Russo didn't realize this. Judge Russo presided over a case that was tried in September of 2019 in Colleton County, and the case was a state of Jose Larios versus Dominion Energy, which used to be called South Carolina Electric and Gas, but they lost and sold to Dominion after the big nuclear fiasco. Dominion bought them, so they bought them and they bought their lawsuits, including this one. which took place in Colleton in September. Apparently, Mr. Larios was a landscaper, migrant guy, no wife, no kids, sent a little money home to Mexico to his mom and dad on occasion, but had no family here, no kids. And apparently he was electrocuted through some negligence of South Carolina Electric and Gas. Tragic. They sued South Carolina Electric and Gas, and it goes to trial in Colleton County, and the jury comes back and finds them negligent and awards the estate of Larios a verdict of $21 million. Now, don't quote me on this, but I am not worth $21 million. I am married and have a child, and a pretty good earning potential going forward. But I don't know that you could make a case that Kevin Brackett is worth $21 million. So this guy, Dominion files a motion through their lawyers and says, we want a new trial. This is clearly so far out of bounds with reality that we need a new trial here. Something went wrong and we just want a new trial. The lawyers for the estate of Larios, who have got a $21 million paycheck, 40% approximately of which is going to go in their pocket as their fee. They don't want to lose their $8-9 million. So they want to defend against this motion for a new trial. They don't want a new trial, so who do they hire to defend their $21 million verdict? Good guess, but no. No, bigger fish than that.
Much bigger.
They hire Representative Merle Smith, who is the chairman of JMS, the committee that the judge is going to be going in front of the next month.
He mostly does defense briefs.
Yeah, he mostly does it. This is kind of, he had nothing to do with the case before that, so he had to learn all the facts and do all this stuff in order to prepare to respond to this motion for a new trial, which was filed on October the 8th. And on October the 18th, he appears for the first time and says, I'm going to oppose this motion for a new trial, and he argues it the week, I think the 25th of October. And a week later, Judge Russo, to his credit, grants the motion for a new trial, despite the fact that he stood up and said, this is wrong. $21 million is too much. This is a problem, and I'm ordering a new trial. We're going to have a do-over in this thing. So, how do you think it's screened? Now, I don't know anything about Merle Smith's activities around that time. I don't know whether he took that personally. I don't. But everybody in this room thought the same exact thing. So whether or not Merle Smith picked up the phone and said, I want you to fix that guy, or whether he didn't, it looks like hell. Because what happened to Tony Russo, who was on a smooth glide path for re-election, he shows up for his screening on Monday, November 18th, and he came with us to the committee, sat right behind me. I wanted him to be there. He wanted to be there. If you got questions, here I am. He sat right behind me. He said on the 18th, they spoke on the record for a brief time, but then they go into executive session. They ask him about a Facebook post. It's pretty tepid. The questioning is pretty easygoing. What about this Facebook post? You had a complaint, because apparently he'd written a Facebook post, something to the effect of, well, they're jumping all over Trump because, of something he said. But here, go back to this article in 1997, Bill Clinton said the exact same thing, and the media didn't jump on him. So it's like there's a double standard. Well, that was the problem. Somebody filed a complaint on it. It went nowhere. The complaint went nowhere. They said, just try not to be political. You're a judge. You can't do that sort of thing. So don't post on Facebook. And I don't. Pictures of puppies or whatever. I don't put anything on Facebook. I don't even know how to work it right. Anyway, the complaint went to John Nichols' office. You heard about him. He's the head of ODC, the boogeyman for lawyers. And they found no problem with what the judge did. They said they, gave him a cautionary letter or something like that. Said, no, it's not a big deal to them. So when they asked him about that, they said, well, so we just need to check your other Facebook posts and see what else might be out there. So give us permission to do that and help us download all those. We'll look at them and you come back on Wednesday. So he did. And when he came back on Wednesday, they went and closed the session again, executive session, and they started to beat the hell out of him. They attacked him, called him out, accused him of terrible things, said he did things he shouldn't have done, that he, questioned his integrity, questioned whether he should be a good judge, attacked him. He was shell-shocked. He was not expecting that at all. Imagine, you're a judge. You're used to people saying, yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor, and all of a sudden, you're just getting hammered. So after beating on him for some period of time, one of them, I think he said it was Todd, looked at him. They never broke for a vote. So this was decided beforehand. They never broke for a vote. Todd or somebody looked at him and said, we are not going to screen you out. You are done as a judge. You're finished. Now, the only question is, do we want to go into public session and do all of this on the record? And have all this come out publicly? Or do you just want to withdraw your candidates? And he was like, he's like, he's spinning. And he says, I need to go talk to my wife. Can I tell you tomorrow? I just need to go home and sit, And they said, you have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes. He freaked out. Said, okay, I'll withdraw. Talked to his wife on the phone real quick and ended a many, many decades career in 5 minutes on this. Ridiculous. So he drives back to Florence that night and talks to a lawyer, and they said, you shouldn't withdraw. You should go forward. Make them do this publicly. Let's see where they stand. Go ahead, put it out there. So he calls in and says, I want to withdraw my withdrawal. I want to rescind it. I want to go forward. I want my hearing. And they said, no, too late. Sorry. Too bad. You've withdrawn. You're done. So he was finished, and he is no longer a judge today. So his seat became vacant. This is the postscript, Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. His seat became vacant at the end of June, when his term ended, June 2020. He becomes, his seat's vacant. So they get 10 or 14 people apply for Judge Russo's seat. And they go through the screening process, blah, 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 blah. They put it all out there. And then they go to the hearings in November of 2020. And John Monk wrote this article talking about those hearings. He actually attended the screenings for Judge Russo's seat. And I love this article. David turned me on to it. I didn't know it because I'm up there in York County. I don't read the state a lot, but this beautiful article. Hit the next one. He starts off by saying, ancestors, family pedigrees, old friendships, college ties, easy cheer, and even merit were all part of the midst last week in a ritual where candidates for South Carolina's open judgeships parade before a judicial screening commission to see if they have the right stuff to make it on the bench. Ancestors, family pedigrees, all that sort of thing, that's what matters. The fact that most of the 14 candidates had ties to the judiciary or public officials was a given. This is a rare moment of complete candor from Mr. Rutherford. If you find a lawyer coming in here that doesn't have connections, I promise you they won't make it out, said Rutherford, himself a prominent defense attorney. We have a very small legal community. If somebody came in here and didn't have a connection to anybody in this room, it would be odd. I don't know how they would make it out. It's like, it doesn't matter how good you are. You could be Scalia. You could be a brilliant lawyer, a beautiful, wonderful judge, fair, neutral, independent. Wouldn't make a darn bit of difference to these people if you're not connected to them somehow. That's all that matters in South Carolina. It's not what you know, it's who you know. That's what he's saying. One of the people was H. Stephen DeBerry IV, and I do not know Mr. DeBerry. I have no idea. He may be a fine man, maybe a great judge. A Florence lawyer and member of the Florence County Council. DeBerry is first cousin to Representative Smith, the powerful House member and screening commissioner. Asked by the state whether that familial tie presented a conflict of interest for Smith, Smith said he doesn't have a conflict voting on his cousin because he's not immediate family. But he was retained anyway for the state. wants to do this on his own merit, blah, blah, blah. So he was one of the 3 that got screened out for Tommy Russo's seat. Guess who got elected to replace Tommy Russo?
He did.
The very elected to circuit.
I can't make it up.
You really can't. I mean, it's just like, what do you say to that? Again, maybe it was all fair. Maybe everything was on the up and up. I don't know. I wasn't in there. But how does it look? Oh, yeah, God,
That's
it's
the problem, they don't
horrible.
care.
It's just wretched.
They don't care.
So, we went and talked, and we told them all this, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. I mean, they're like offended, like we're insulting. And we're like, well, you asked us.
They asked us to come back to answer questions.
Oh,
And we
yes.
did. And we showed up and we're there, we're laughing, can't wait yet. They wouldn't allow us to respond to the rhetorical questions.
Yeah, one guy tried to ask us a direct question, and they shut him down, said, oh, you didn't get the memo. They're not talking anymore.
It came from up above. It came from the speaker's office. Don't let Pascoe and Brackett talk anymore.
We've heard quite enough.
We were just there for eye candy that day.
They knew they were gonna do that before we drove all the way. I drove all the way from York County. I could have been
I
fighting
over there
crime
watch
up
these
there.
guys answer questions, and it's just like,
Yeah.
waste of time.
Rick was there for every minute of it, and I appreciate him doing that. But yeah, it was like, why didn't you just tell us that? We didn't need to drive up here. I could have been actually doing something productive. Instead, we just sat there like potted plants, listening to them, attack us.
And one more quick point while I forget. All right, so y'all hear what happens to Russo, you heard what happened to Christy Harrington. Who else knows about what happened to them? The judges.
Every judge in the state.
So when you hear Rick, Solicitor Hubbard, tell you about how the judge might not want to step on JMSC members' toes, same from Kevin, now you know why. And I'm gonna tell you this, the last point. How did we get Judge Russo and Judge Harrington to give us this information? 18 months ago, about a year and a half ago, it was after Greenville, a sitting judge told me, David, you need to talk to Russo and Harrington and have them tell you what happened to them. I said, what happened to them? I read it to them, no. This judge told me, he said, you don't know the inside story. And 18 months ago, I was able to get them to tell us what they believe happened to. And again, it's the mindset of a judge. That's why we gotta change the way we pick our judges.
They do not need to live in fear of their decisions.
Yes.
Their decisions should be unfettered by what consequences their decision may have on the opinion of the General Assembly for them and their candidacy going forward. That is just flat wrong. So, all the judges we've talked about up to now are circuit judges, okay? Now, there's magistrate and municipal judges, and they handle traffic court, basically. Everything up to 30 days. Above 30 days, all the way to the death penalty, that's circuit court. General sessions, criminal court, common pleas, civil. Then you got the family court bench over there. They do juvenile stuff. But magistrate court, these are some recommendations that we presented to the General Assembly, because they were like, well, how are we gonna do it if we don't do it the way we're doing it? I mean, what else could we do? It's like, come on, man, we can do better than we got. So I said, for magistrate's court, it's even worse than circuit court. You know why? Because in magistrate's court, who picks the magistrate? The state senators. They pick them directly. That means in Greenville, there's a bunch of magistrates who were handpicked by Carl Allen, the guy I was telling you about. What do you think happens when Carl Allen walks in with his DUI defendant to represent him in that magistrate's court? That guy's job is hanging in the balance. What's he supposed to do? You think that the state gets a fair trial in a situation like that? So all the magistrates are picked by senators. Most senators are not lawyers. Most senators don't do criminal defense work, so it's not a problem necessarily everywhere. But I appreciate Governor McMaster standing up and saying, I'm gonna start taking a harder look at these candidates. And I'm just not gonna let you automatically do this. We need to do a better job of screening these people. So my suggestion to the committee, because this is what they're really supposed to be doing, is coming up with ideas of how we could do better. I said, why don't we turn magistrate court into district court and make it up to 3 years and take a lot of pressure off general sessions? We have so much business in general sessions. and make sure we have magistrates who are lawyers, because if you're gonna go to put somebody in jail for 3 years, you ought to know the law. I'm sorry, 3 years, 30 days, I kind of feel a little, bad about sometimes, but 3 years, if you're gonna throw somebody in the slam for 3 years, you ought to have a lawyer. The district judges need to be lawyers, but they can hire magistrates who are not lawyers to continue to handle the cases who are 30 days or less. The number of judges in every county should be dictated by population, and they can be appointed by the senior circuit judge.
Yeah.
So there's no,
One judge.
one judge picks them and supervises and responsible for making sure they're moving their cases and doing their job fairly and efficiently. And then that person, that magistrate is only worried about keeping another judge happy. So what could be wrong with that? And then establish criteria to evaluate their performance, the age of cases that they have on their docket. Are they receiving complaints? Are they doing jury trials? Are they setting bonds in a timely fashion for people who've been charged with crimes? This is an audit. Next one. JMSC. We're happy with just getting the lawyer legislators off. This is Kevin's wish list. This is like if Santa Claus was coming to town and he said, Kevin, what can I bring you? Our JMSC, every member would be appointed by the governor. Okay? There would be term limits for the members. So if you're a judge, you don't ever have to worry about appearing in front of the same people on the JMSC. So they could be lawyers, because you're gonna appear there one time in front of that person, and by the time you come up again, that person's gone, it's somebody else. So nobody's got their sword hanging over your neck like we do now. They should be open and televised. This is the people's business. Why shouldn't we see what's going on? They should include, the JMSC should have retired judges on it. Who better to know whether somebody's capable of being a good family court judge than somebody who was a family court judge for 25 years? They're gonna be able to ask the questions to find out, is this somebody who's good or not? They should have a pool of members. They could even put the membership up and say, we're gonna have lawyers who have 25 years experience practicing in the court. And you're only gonna be on there for 2 years at a time. We're gonna rotate you off. We have 2,000 or 3,000 lawyers that would fit that qualification, who've been practicing for years and years. And they know what to look for in a good judge. And they're interested in having good judges, because they're gonna go in front of them. You don't wanna go in front of some judge who doesn't know what he's doing. If you're a good lawyer, you wanna practice in front of a judge who's good. So you got a vested interest in making sure they're good. And extend the term of circuit judge and family court judge to 8 years. So even when they come through, it'll be a different governor in the governor's office, because they're term limited. They can't do more than 8. And by the time they come back up, it'll be a different governor that appoints the JMSC. How hard is this? The election process. Now, let me tell you, it isn't election necessarily that's the problem. It's not selection, it's reselection. If I'm on the bench and I know I have to go back in front of you every 6 years, when you come in my courtroom, I'm gonna pay close attention to everything you do. I'm gonna take a deep interest in everything, and I wanna make sure you're smiling just like you are now when you come in the door and by the time you leave, because I want you to be happy with me. So, in half the states, judges are selected by the governor, approved by the legislature, or some combination thereof. And then once they're on the bench, they never have to go back to the legislature again. The people vote, not in a contested election. I want to be clear, I'm not for that. I don't think judges need to be out there raising money like politicians. Because then you're just gonna have who's giving them the most money. You'll have the defense lawyers contributing, and it'll just be, you'll be buying the judges a different way. But the people in an up or down election, he's doing a good job. He's doing a bad job. And if they vote him out, then it goes back to the governor and the legislature to replace him. And then you got him back in there. That's how it works in most states, retention elections. It's called the Missouri plan. So I am of the opinion that reselection by the legislature is the greatest threat to judicial independence. And that will take a constitutional change, because that is not in our Constitution. So the only way we'll get that is if the legislature votes to change the Constitution, and then y'all vote to approve that at a general election.
Get rid of some legislators.
What's that?
Get rid of a few of those legislators.
Well, I'll tell you, this is something else. I want to diverge for just a second. I say this and every time I get in a room full of the faith. How many people in here are in favor of term limits for legislators? It's always everybody. What a coincidence. Everybody's in favor of term limits. So if everybody's in favor, why don't we have them?
So we don't get to vote on it.
Because they're in charge. Has anybody ever heard of a bird that volunteered to have its wings clipped?
We don't put enough pressure.
No bird ever does. They don't want to have term limits because they don't want to go anywhere. What do we not have in South Carolina that half the country has? How do we do roads? What besides good roads do we not have that half the country does have? Ballot initiatives. Has anybody ever heard of that? I hate to say anything about California. California is, I don't want to say anything that makes me sound like I'm in favor of anything that California does, but y'all have heard of Proposition 42 and Proposition 17. Those are ballot initiatives. The public gets together, they write a law or a change to the Constitution. They circulate a petition among the public. It's like the purest form of democracy. You decide what it's going to be. If you get enough signatures supporting it, then it goes on the next ballot of the general election. And the people vote, should this be the law or not? And if the people vote it is, the governor doesn't need to sign it, legislature doesn't need to approve it, it just becomes the law or change in the Constitution. Y'all can have term limits. If I was gonna go to the Republican Party and to the state convention and say anything at all, you give me 1 minute, I would sell ballot initiatives and say, forget all the other planks in our platform. We just want one thing. Give us this, and we'll figure out the rest. Half the country has it. I don't know why we don't trust the vote. Well, I mean, but you know, who picks the lawyer legislators? Who puts the legislators there in the first place?
Drew McKissick.
Y'all do. Okay. The next and last thing I want to talk about is Hamilton Federalist 78, which the quote from here is, "There is no liberty if the power of judging be not separated from the legislative and executive powers." And it proves in the last place that as liberty can have nothing to fear from the judiciary alone, but would have everything to fear from its union with the other departments. In South Carolina, the legislature and the judiciary are bound up as one. Hamilton told us 230 years ago that we should be afraid. So, what else do we need to do to promote the independent judiciary? The last thing I would recommend is, I'm referring you, this is the vesting clause from Article 3 of the United States Constitution. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts, like district courts like we have here, as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, which means lifetime. I'm not in favor of lifetime tenure for state judges. I'm not suggesting that. But I am referring your attention to "and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office." What is the other threat to the independence of the judiciary? The power of mercy. By threatening their finances, which the legislature properly controls, levying taxes, raising money, and appropriating that money for the public good, including spending money on the judiciary. That's a proper function of the legislature. But that is a weapon that can be used against the judiciary to bend them to their will. So I think that what we need to do is say that the judicial budget should be no less than what it was the previous year, or a set percentage of the total budget, whichever is greater. And if there is a financial crisis like the Great Recession, 2008, and everybody has to get a cut, you can cut the judiciary too, but no more than any other department. So you can't cut the judiciary 50% and cut everybody else 5%, and you're punishing them. So you've got to treat them the same as anybody else. That would protect them from the power of the purse. So, the last slide, I think, is the one you've all been waiting for. Questions? What you got? We have done such a good job, David. There's nothing left to say.
What to do to try to fix this?
What to do? I see my friend Larry in the back against the wall there from York, and I know he's been in touch with y'all, and he's reached out to other county chairs throughout the state. David and I are willing to take this show on the road wherever they want to hear it. Y'all decide who your representatives are. By virtue of the fact that you're sitting here in this room tonight, you've demonstrated your own personal commitment to good government. And you have an outsized influence over what people are doing and who they support. By virtue of the fact that you're committed to doing something about it and to spreading the word. You now are educated. More than 95% of the people walking down the sidewalk right now in Lexington County. You are more educated on how the judiciary in South Carolina functions. Go like Paul, among the people, spread the gospel, share the good word, and encourage your fellow citizens to take action, to call your legislators and call your senators. Because Merle Smith, like David said, he is a powerful, powerful person. He has a tremendous amount of power as the Speaker of the House. I continue to hold hope that he will have an epiphany, like Paul, on the road to Damascus. And he will go, oh my God, this does need to be changed. I really do. I hope that he wants the best for South Carolina because he's in a position to do something about it. He really is. I hope that he wakes up and says, by God, this is a problem. We're going to fix it. We're going to have an independent judiciary. But if he doesn't, who puts him in his chair?
Voters.
The 123 other representatives from around the state. They vote for him to be the Speaker of the House. And they can vote him out. So if your individual person goes, well, I can't do anything about it, you might not be able to do anything about it by yourself. But all you need are 62 other legislators who are willing to find a speaker who is willing to do something about it. Call me. She asked, how do we know who we can trust? Call me. We'll tell you. That's a really, really good one. Joe White gave the best. If I have one sentence to tell people about judicial selection and how bad it is, he had the best one-liner for it I've heard. He said, if you're a Gamecock fan, how would you feel if Clemson hired the referees for the annual Clemson Carolina? How would you feel about that?
I thought they did.
And it's just like, hey, first of all, oh yeah, that would be really bad. I wouldn't feel good about that. So he is exactly right. So we have to engage our legislators. They need to understand. Believe it or not, a number of legislators told me this. They do respond to people writing them from home. They actually do care. And because they don't want there to be a groundswell again. You're the people that put them there. And if enough of you reach out and say, this is serious to us, we don't want any excuses. You need to take this seriously and you need to fix this. And if we can do this across the state, reaching out, if Larry's calling other county chairmen, we'll go to Greenville.
You say that, Micah was reelected by 20-something votes.
I know, he barely made it.
Barely made it. His best friend is Todd Rutherford.
Are you kidding?
So I can't, he was his biggest defender on the ad hoc panel. How are Lexington Republicans voting for that guy? And by the way, he has agreed to debate me or have a town hall in Lexington County. Hold his feet to the fire so he and I can debate judicial reform. We're gonna invite everybody. But hold his feet to the fire for me. Say, hey, Representative Cassidy, you told David Pascoe and the media you wanted to have a town hall debate on judicial reform with him. Let's do it this month. Let's do it no later than this next month. You spend a little bit of time in Columbia, and that's how it can happen. But just hold his feet to the fire, and let's have that debate either this month or next. The sooner the better.
Mr. I'll answer your questions how you got voted in. There was only 1,900 plus votes out of like 40,000 voters.
That's the other
Nobody
great
was
point.
voting in the primary.
That's the other great point. I mean, these
People just
legislators
don't
get
show.
elected.
We got 20% voter turnout in our June primaries. Everybody likes to wait to November. I don't know who tattooed November in everybody's brain.
That's a problem.
But you got such a low turnout. He won by 24 votes.
Mr. Brackett, then am I to understand that since the trial lawyers, shall we say, don't exactly form a lobby per se, but do dump campaign contributions into local races, that it would make sense for the Republicans in each county for us to donate across district lines to key races to unseat officers of that commission, as well as different legislative lawyers to get them out of the legislature. Because I don't know what you guys consider a conflict of interest, but as an OSHA manager, I was never allowed in industry to set the OSHA standard. So as a Fox, you don't want me setting the security perimeter for a chicken farm or hen house. Then we should be targeting them with financial contributions prior to the March sign up and throughout the primaries, because as Drew McKissick knows, the primary is the election in South Carolina. So am I to understand that would be a key thing for us to turn the tables on them and target their key people, take them off the chessboard?
And get active in the jurisdictions where those people are running, absolutely. Find out who those folks are. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the House, but Luke Rankin is one of those folks who is very, very strong on preserving the General Assembly's authority over the judiciary.
We have a bounty on his scalp. We are looking for someone to run against him right now.
You know, I talked about fentanyl. I talked about fentanyl a lot. We were trying to get a fentanyl trafficking bill in South Carolina for 3 years, just begging, and he was one of the people that was the hardest to deal with, to try to get, because he's the chairman of the House, of the Senate Judiciary. If he doesn't want a bill to come out, it's not coming out.
I'm gonna say this publicly because you're a solicitor, other solicitor, and Hickson Solicitor doesn't love me anymore, Georgetown County. That is because law enforcement in Georgetown and Horry County are tied in with the drug trade. And if they're tied in with the drug trade, they're not the end of that problem. They're the tip of the iceberg of that problem, because you don't run a drug trade without lawyers backing you up and without people in Columbia backing you up as well, sir. And I'm saying that here publicly. I went up against the last crooked lawyer, sheriff in Georgetown County. He's dead. I do have an alibi for that night when he passed away in the hospital. And so I know what it's like, but that is the problem we have in Georgetown and Horry County. So if you think that this is a simple swamp issue and Luke and those aren't swamp creatures, it is very bad on the coast. It is very bad in those counties.
Well, I know we would be better off on this issue of judicial reform if he was not chairman of the Senate Judiciary.
Regardless, I think one thing, and it was very discouraging to hear what you shared with us. However, I would recommend that each of us read and meditate on Luke chapter 18, where it talks about the judge who did not fear God, and how that judge changed his ruling because someone was persistent. Each of us has to be persistent. We're gonna get copies of this? Can you email it out? You'll send us?
We've got the email for
Okay.
I'll email it to you tonight or first thing.
Second thing, how committed is the governor to what you're talking about?
I think the governor is very committed to achieving a judicial selection method that gives the executive and the legislative equal authority, because right now it's all siloed in the legislature. And that is the way to forward, is to divide up the initial selection, at least between those two bodies, so that neither one has too much power. Right now, the legislature's got the judiciary right now.
Well, he made it a big deal in his inauguration speech.
He's gonna make it a big deal again
Yes.
very soon.
What's the organization, you're gonna have to do this, or are you handing us the baton?
Well, we're handing the baton all over the state. Each and every one of you is carrying the baton.
Yes.
And each and every one of you has the responsibility for passing it as many times as you can among your
For the
fellow
information
citizens.
on what a scoundrel these people are, not you, many of us.
Well, there's too many people that don't know. And not everybody is as engaged as y'all and willing to come out on Monday night and sit and listen to two long-winded lawyers.
I like to always look outside the box, and obviously we are screwed right now, and we're screwed with McKissick was screwed with the primaries. I mean, we know how the elections are in South Carolina. Why couldn't someone go to the federal and say, you know, South Carolina's not following the Constitution because you're supposed to have, I mean, we're not following the Constitution. There's something in it that says you can't create a law that's contrary to the Constitution. This is contrary to the Constitution.
But South Carolina is empowered as a state to establish its own form of government, its own constitution.
But you still have to follow the federal.
Well, our constitution can't conflict with it, but there is no conflict. The United States Constitution is silent on how the states are able to establish their
But it's a
government.
conflict that it's not three separate branches.
Well, there are technically three separate
Well,
branches.
no, they're
just
not, from what you
co-equal.
said tonight.
Yeah, no, they're not
Anyway.
co-equal. But there are technically three separate branches of government.
Well, you know, there are and then
But,
there
but
aren't.
even the United States Constitution doesn't say that, South Carolina or any other state has to have a judiciary. I mean, we're able to establish, for example, Nebraska has a unicameral legislature. They don't have a Senate and House.
I just thought that you had to, I thought that anybody that was in America couldn't create laws that were contrary to the Constitution.
You can't.
Seems to
Part
me
of the
like that's
federal
contrary.
system-
Anyway,
Part of the federalism where they leave those with those issues with the states. You know, the notion that.
States' rights.
Local people, right, local people will be able to handle their local issues, so it's kind of grounded in that.
Any more questions?
I'd just like to make the point that you're absolutely correct. It's our fault because the citizenry has not been involved, but we are getting organized. We are fighting back. We are pushing back. Pamela's pushing back. We're fighting the cabal that's out there that is trying to divide and conquer us and trying to get us to look at other things as opposed to what we really need to focus on. But I'd like to make just three little quick statements or comments about it. It's not, we're all talking about what's going on in the judiciary and what's going on in criminal law. It's everywhere. It's every single issue. It's roads, it's education, it's school choice. I mean, pick your issue. This same type of crazy corruption is going on in all issues. So don't just think, well, we fix this and everything's better. We gotta fix the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, and the legislative dominance of the judicial branch, the problem is that the legislature also really does a lot of functions or controls a lot of functions that are typically executive.
Correct.
Things that the executive branch, how do you know who to hold accountable for the roads when the Department of Transportation, the Transportation Secretary might be appointed by the governor, but the commission that really runs the show is appointed 3 members by the House, 3 members by the Senate, and 3 members by the governor. Well, that's 9 people, 6 of whom are picked by the legislature. Who really controls the Department of Transportation? And I don't even know if those numbers are right, so I'm making up, but there's countless examples of the legislature having its finger in too many pies and controlling things that are not there. And then as a result, the people don't know who to blame. They don't know when things aren't right. Who do you point the finger at?
You stole my second point, which is exactly, because you're absolutely correct about that. But I know y'all probably haven't thought about this, but consider the people who want to become judges that are in government today. Think about the General Counsel of the Department of Revenue. Think about the General Counsel of all these different government organizations that want, their career goal is to become a judge. They are going to do what the legislature tells them to while they're sitting there performing that job too. So that's another big issue and problem that's out there. And I know we're talking about magistrates and the court of, civil court and all that kind of stuff, but it goes to the higher levels. It does go to the Court of Appeals and it does go to the Supreme Court. I literally talked to a legislator today that said about a particular issue that is right now in front of the state Supreme Court, and they're like, well, if it doesn't pass now, we'll wait till after they elect a new state Supreme Court, and maybe they'll push it through then. I mean, this is pervasive everywhere in the state of South Carolina, and it is because historically, back into the early 1600s, and we were set up to be a strong legislature. So that one gentleman that made that comment, he's correct about it. We were set up that way, but it's wrong, and it was corrupt then, it's corrupt now. We got to fix the whole thing.
Well, that's why I say a lot of it's going to require constitutional
Yes.
changes, because a lot of this is just baked into our Constitution. But ballot initiatives, people, this is the way forward. You can fix a lot of things if the people have to say over what to do. And you have to be careful and thoughtful about the proposals that you put forward. because they're tricky. They need to be constitutional, federal and state. So you've got, it's challenging, but if you want some of these changes, that's one way to do it.
Well, thank you guys for doing what you're doing, because it says a lot.
I just wanted to let everyone know that it's gonna take each and every one of you in this room to continue working together because we are stronger together. And I'm so proud to see you, David, working with Kevin, working with you, Representative of Lexington, our solicitor. We've got representation from York, Greenville, Georgetown GOP in this room, Lexington, and I'm so excited to have this, and I want to see more of this. We have to work together for change.
You'll
And I'm
take
so
this
excited about
show
it.
on the road to the four corners of South Carolina, happy to go.
Going to Greenville, February the 5th, right?
Yep, welcome, it'll be fun.
That's right. Ringling Brothers Farm.
That's it. Anybody, anything, anybody wanna guide?
Get the process started.
Well, I think, maybe one thing would be just to invite your legislators to come here and tell you where they stand on this issue and what they intend to do. So you can hear an earful and you'd sure like to know what they're gonna do to fix this.
But they'll lie to us. They do it every day. I try to talk to them, but they tell us what we want to hear.
And they might do that, but what y'all have now is information you didn't have before you came in this room. And they might have a different take on it, but they've got to explain their take. You saw how passionate we are, you know I'm passionate about it. And there's a reason, because people walk out, they don't believe in this system, they don't believe in us anymore. That is probably the lowest blow, when you're trying to help a victim, and they no longer think you can do anything, because it's fixed. So, invite them in here, and get their opinion, see how passionate they are, and what their real angle is. And, if they're full of baloney, then you've exposed them.
And I promise you, we know we're speaking truth to power, and
There's a price.
There's a price to be paid, and we don't know what that might be down the
Our
road.
budgets,
But
I mean, they've already fired some shots across the bow. We dared to take on legislators, so they're looking, oh, well, solicitors, we've given you money, their dockets, they fund us, and they can make us hurt. But we basically said, hell with it.
Yeah.
Y'all will never
I only want to be a judge for like a week. I just want to say a few times, I'll be the judge of that. Then I'll get old and I'll be like, no, I'm just listening.
Let's give a